the most chaotic fantasy offenses in the NFC are somehow more chaotic after the Commanders traded Brian Robinson to the Niners. It seems pretty innocuous. We've been hearing about it now for better part of a week. That it seemed increasingly that Robinson would not be back, and then it was clear that he would not be back, and then the question was just landing spot. I went on record thinking it would be the Bengals. I didn't think Washington would trade within the conference because I thought they would trade Robinson to someone who was a contender. I don't think the Niners are a contender this year. I could be completely off, but that's just what I believe. So the trade does not make much sense to me unless San Francisco truly believes that with a healthy Christian McCaffrey and with the receiving core getting healthy, presumably in the latter half of the season, that they can make a run. And that's to me the only reason to do it. But what do I know? I'm not a GM. Fantasy-wise, that's what we care about. And things are more confusing now. And part of that is my own bias about Christian McCaffrey. I don't trust him this season, not just because he's had serious injuries, several times in his career. It also comes down to his age and initial research that I've been doing showing the long-term effects of 400 plus touches in a season for a running back, not just the following season, but in the seasons after. And the idea that in most cases, the running back never comes close to getting back to that 400 plus touch form. Doesn't mean that they didn't have 400 plus touches. It just means that in terms of their efficiency, their fantasy points per touch, their general abilities seem to not be anywhere near, in general, where they were at that peak. And we just have to consider Christian McCaffrey as post-peak, or at least I do. That getting 400 fantasy points is not in the cards. I think 350 is completely out of the question. I think he'll be lucky to get 300 fantasy points. That's my view. So where does that leave us? Brian Robinson joins a backfield where I already think that Christian McCaffrey is likely to miss at least a couple games and is likely to be replaced in game because he won't be getting 24 touches a game. I think he'll be getting closer to 16 to 18 at the most. Maybe 14 to 16 is more realistic in some games, where Isaac Guerendo is going to be the guy mopping up, potentially 6, 8 touches a game, maybe even a couple more, as a back end 1B, essentially. Robinson now, at least according to the Commanders website, is higher on the depth chart. And we should assume that he's higher on the depth chart until he isn't. And that's part of the problem. Guerendo goes from being a great handcuff, really terrific handcuff, given what I think about McCaffrey, to essentially undraftable, unless you believe that Brian Robinson will fall flat and Guerendo will sweep in and become the starter if McCaffrey goes down. I think that's a long shot, though, especially if you're in a league where you've got even 7 bench spots. I don't know how you can keep a number 3 running back unless you draft McCaffrey and Robinson. That's really the only reason to draft Guerendo at this point. So Guerendo, you lose out. If you've already drafted and you've taken him as a handcuff, there is a high probability that he will not get you more than 60, 70 fantasy points in the season. It's not worth holding him if that's the case. Robinson, meanwhile, I don't really trust him. As I saw something, what was that stat? It was like he's averaged 4.3 yards per game or something like that in his career. Well, he's declined in terms of his abilities. That's part of the reason why Washington unloaded him and have loaded up on new running backs. That is part of the reason that he was no longer useful. He is not the same running back that he was his rookie year. And so that should tell us something about his risk on the Niners. Then you factor in just the cluster of Juwan Jennings being hurt and Brandon Ayuk not returning for many weeks, maybe 2 months, who knows? And a largely untested Ricky Pearsall potentially being the number 1 on that team. And I think 32-year-old George Kittle. I can't remember how old he is, but someone who was huge target share. And Kittle's one of those guys, you draft him, and then after 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, if he's just going off on his first 2 or 3 weeks, I would unload him as fast as possible. Because in the fantasy playoffs, assuming everyone's healthy, Kittle historically has been a number 4, number 5 offensive option when his receivers and Christian McCaffrey have been healthy. It's when they're hurt that Kittle has stepped up and done most of his damage. So you have to factor that in. There's some chaos just with that. There's already chaos with whether you draft Jennings and where, when, presumably. There's already questions about where you draft Ayuk or when. And there's questions about Ricky Pearsall. Do you trust him? So 5, 6 question marks already. Let's say 5. Brock Purdy is the uber question mark in that because I don't know that he can sustain top 10 numbers in that offense. And now you add in Robinson that completely muddies a backfield that for many people is clear cut because it's McCaffrey. For me, it's not clear cut because I don't think McCaffrey's going to get the usage and I don't think he's going to have the efficiency. Doesn't mean he's going to fall flat on his face. It just means that I want a surefire handcuff and I no longer have one on that team, which means I've just lost a valued asset that I wanted to draft. And that's how I feel about that. The other side of it is Washington. A similar cluster. Yes, Jaden Daniels. He will probably crush it. Although, as I've talked about in a previous podcast, we don't know what his norm is. We only know what his rookie year was. And there are many times when a great rookie year is followed by a crash where it could be at a 20 to 25% decline in fantasy production. Daniels' legs should keep him afloat. That is a big deal. But there is some question mark. There's the bigger question marks are Terry McLaurin. Is he going to get a contract? Is Washington going to trade him away? Man, that would be odd, right? To basically trade away in one off season your number 1 running back and your number 1 wide receiver right after you've made it to the, so close to the Super Bowl. You couldn't script that. I mean, that just wouldn't make any sense, except it does in this instance if they're not going to give McLaurin what he wants and they feel like they can get assets. And if they feel like they can build around Daniels to the extent where in the next year or two with draft capital and a major amount of cap space that they can basically get whatever they want. If people want to come to Washington to play with Daniels, suddenly it becomes a destination for free agents. Then I get it. But that is a cluster because we don't know how to value McLaurin. And as a result, we don't know how to value Deebo Samuel. And frankly, I haven't known how to value Deebo Samuel in 2 or 3 years. I mean, who knows what you're going to get from him? And then as far as their number 3 receiver, is it Noah Brown? I don't know. Is Michael Gallup somehow going to return to some 600-yard form? Then there's tight end, Zach Ertz. I did a podcast about Zach Ertz. I don't know how you trust a guy who's turning 35, as good as he was last year. It still boggles the mind how someone he was the 35th pick in the 2013 draft. There's only 4 guys left who are picked ahead of him who are still in the NFL. It's baffling to me the idea that Ertz can be a fantasy starter. I'll put it that way. At going into his age 35 season. And now a backfield that is far more confusing than 3 months ago. 3 months ago, it was going to be Robinson, Eckler. And then, we might see, Jeremy McNichols. We might see Chris Rodriguez. We might see rookie Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Now it turns out Krosky-Merritt has gone from, I think he was maybe the number 5 running back, on the depth chart maybe a month ago. Although with rookies that happens a lot. And now he's in some depth charts, he's number 1. So I don't know how you work that through in your fantasy draft kind of processing. I've already said a great deal about my views on a 7th round rookie like Krosky-Merritt, and historically that they almost never finish in the top 50. There have been like 1 or 2 examples in the last 25 years. So you've got Krosky-Merritt, who could break away. I could be completely wrong, but if he doesn't, it's him, Rodriguez, maybe a little bit McNichols, and Eckler, an aging post-prime, still good, but post-prime Eckler. I don't know how you can draft any of those guys with confidence. unless you happen to be a Krosky Merritt true believer, in which case, go for it. I just have my concerns that I've already stated. So this is an example of a trade that happens basically on the eve of a huge draft weekend. And people are now stuck with the prospect of one less handcuff that they can count on for the Niners and a more muddled, in my opinion, Washington backfield that goes with a general confusion about the receiving cores for both of those teams. It makes me want to not draft any Niners or Commanders going into my draft. Surely when it comes right down to it, if the price is right, I'll go for it. But again, this is an example where a trade kind of messes things up rather than makes things easier. That can be good for some people. For me, it's one less person, Isaac Correndo, who I want to get. And at this stage of the game, I want more bargains in my back pocket, not fewer. I'm BJ Riddell, Fantasy Football for Winners. Follow me on the blog. Email me anytime. Sign up for my rankings. We'll see you tomorrow.